What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today I'm going to be talking about common behaviors and attitudes that I see preceding major events. We'll be focusing on OCIC, the Oceania International Championships that's coming up this week, which is the first major tournament with Sword and Shield legal outside of Asia. And I'll be looking back at past examples for the things I'm talking about, the behaviors and attitudes. And I'll be talking about a few of the decks going into OCIC and the standard format in general with Sword and Shield. Before we go into that, shout out to PotownStore.com, where you can use code Celio for 5% off on PTCGO codes. And also shout out to FlipsideGaming.com, where I write weekly free articles. So, to explain what I mean by the common behaviors and attitudes that precede major events, these are things that I see the community behaviors that I see the community partaking in over social media and in even group messages, or just expressing their feelings towards cards and decks and rules and formats and metas. And a lot of it is groupthink. So like when a group agrees with you and then the group just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and then it's kind of skewing your own ideas. And also just over-exaggerating and over-generalizing out of fear or misunderstanding. So the first thing I'll talk about is a lot about the fear and misunderstanding skewing the ideas and the behaviors and the attitudes surrounding an archetype. And that's going to be Cinccino Mill that we're talking about, which is a new mill deck from Sword and Shield that has been popping up a lot around the internet in the past few weeks. It originated in Japan, and I've covered a couple versions of it on this channel and talked about it a lot, so you can learn more about it in the videos dedicated to Cinccino Mill, or even in the OCIC discussion where we talked about that deck. But the behaviors and attitudes surrounding Cinccino Mill for OCIC mirror the behaviors and attitudes surrounding Pidgeotto control for LAIC, the most recent IC before the one that's coming up this week. And leading up to LAIC, people were saying that Pidgeotto control was like undisputed best deck in format before we even got into the first tournament of the format. It was unfair that we had such a strong deck before the format even started. It was unfair that this deck doesn't allow you to play the game. TPCI has to do something about Aranguru, about the trainer cards that made Pidgeotto control possible. And just a lot of saying like Pidgeotto's the best deck for this tournament. It's going to dominate the tournament. Like you either play Pidgey or you beat it. Those kinds of things. And Pidgeotto control had a handful of performances at LAIC. It didn't win the tournament. It wasn't overwhelming at all. I even know that players that said they played Pidgeotto said they wish they didn't play Pidgeotto. Even players that made it into day 2 with the deck were saying they wish they were playing something else in day 2. And the deck seemed so good going into it. I know there were people that did not believe that the deck was the best deck in format and overwhelming and all of this stuff. I was one of those people that said that I don't think Pidgeotto is such an insane deck. And one of the reasons for that is that we don't see decks that completely dominate tournaments as much as you might think. So maybe you didn't like Zoroark control and expanded, or even back in standard, or you didn't like Pidgeotto control just because it was an alternate win condition deck. It did not take all 6 prizes to win the game. It was winning by other means. But other games that I've either dabbled in or done my research on and just looked at results, they have tournaments frequently where one deck is taking up a majority of the top cut, like over and over. Every time a new set comes out, then that deck takes up a majority of the top cut. And fortunately, we we do see a nice variety in the Pokemon trading card game, in my opinion. Um, the last time I would say that a deck completely dominated a tournament was Seattle Regionals in 2017, where Garbodor Guardians Rising variants took up 24 out of 32 of the day 2 spots. That was an overwhelming dominance, and we really don't see that happen too often. It hasn't happened since then, to my knowledge. And I don't think Chinchino Mill is going to do that this weekend. So back to the behavior and the attitude towards Chinchino Mill, I think it comes from a place of fear and misunderstanding, and possibly even lack of motivation to understand a foreign concept. So, like I said, Chinchino Mill is an alternate win condition, and it does not win a game of Pokemon in the traditional way, and these mill, control, or stall decks, they'll either remove your resources, can mill your deck. Even things like unknown damage and unknown hand, those kind of things are usually frowned upon. And I think it's a combination of fear of this deck is too good, misunderstanding how the deck works, or not understanding how to beat the deck, and also a lack of wanting to learn how to beat the deck, which is why I make these those kind of presentation videos whenever there's a control deck or a mill deck, and kind of explain to you guys how to beat it, because there's a lot of confusion thinking that it's unbeatable. And those behaviors and attitudes combined create this effect where people start thinking that we already have a BDIF. We already have a best deck in format in Chinchino Mill, and its win percentage is astronomical. And I just don't think that's the case, and I don't think we'll be seeing it perform with overwhelming dominance in OCIC. I do think it could perform well. I think it could top 8 the tournament. I don't think it'll win the tournament. But I definitely don't think it will be anything even close to what we saw in Seattle when Garbodor Guardians Rising came out, and it took up 24 out of 32 of the day 2 spots. The next behavior / attitude that I want to talk about that I see happening before major events is when I see players counting out past decks. So maybe a deck was so strong last format, and now a new set comes out, and we're just throwing it by the wayside. We say, oh, it can't succeed anymore because of this one deck. And I find that is hardly the case, at least in recent seasons. So a great example is Ability Zard, the ability version of Reshizard, the way to build it. The deck got top 4 at Worlds, and then people kind of counted it out after Worlds. After the next set came out, people said it was inconsistent. It just relied on hitting welders. And then what does it do? It wins the next major tournament after the next set came out. Because it was an already established deck. The skeleton for it was already pretty established. People knew how to play it. And if you aren't expecting a deck like that, it can really prey on unoptimized decks and suboptimally built decks, and maybe strategies that aren't perfect yet. And I definitely think that the community is counting out Ability Zard as of now, or at least up until a few days. I do think there's a fair amount of other content creators that are noting Ability Zard. I know OmniPoke put out a list for it. We talked about it a bit in my meta discussion a few days ago. And also, but Pidgeotto is also being counted out. So I do think there is a great argument for saying Pidgeotto is weaker now, Pidgeotto control. Since the new Oranguru with Primate Wisdom is kind of a direct counter to it, and then Zacian allows you to draw cards, but there are ways around both. You can just knock out the Guru, you can just stamp Mars Chip every time they go Intrepid Store to end their turn. So there are ways around those counters, and I think people like to jump to conclusions when they see these new counters. Like I said, with Ability Zard, players were saying, oh, we've got better decks now, we can just stop playing Ability Zard, we don't need that deck anymore. And then it had major success directly after. So I don't think we should count out Pidgeotto or Ability Zard right off the bat, or just any decks in general that were successful prior to this set. They were successful for a reason. A new set does change a lot of things, and we have a new rule change now, which adds another layer onto it. But just counting out past decks has always been a bad idea, in my opinion, and in the history it shows. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on, this one will be a little shorter. It's just that when you're getting yourself preoccupied with trying to beat the best decks, or preoccupied with the new deck on the block like Mill, and you have all of these behaviors and group thought going together to create over-exaggeration and assuming things, sometimes you underestimate or just forget how good the best decks are, and why they are the best decks. In my opinion, Mewtwo Malamar and Zacian ADP are making themselves the top 2 right now. That's what it's looking like leading up to OCIC. I think Zacian ADP and Mewtwo Malamar are, if not the top 2 decks, then 2 of the top decks. And oftentimes it's not a bad idea to just play the best deck. And in this case, we have 2 that are fairly close to each other in power level. They play differently. They have different matchups. They have different strategies. So I think there's 2 really great decks at the top, and then and then there's a few following not too far behind, like Pikarom, Baby Blounds, Zacian Lucametal. Chinchino Mill is a fairly good deck itself, but there's a lot of already established decks that are very good, and you don't always have to try to beat the best deck. You can sometimes just join them and play the best deck because it is the best deck for a reason, or one of the best decks. And right now it is hard to say at the beginning of a format, especially, like I said, we have a new set and a new rule change, so things are changing a lot here. It's hard to say which decks are the best, but these decks have already seen success over in Japan, and we've seen a lot of great players talking about them, and we have lists that are being worked on a lot for these archetypes, so they're better established. So I do think it's important to not forget how good the best decks are and why you are trying to beat them in the first place, and it's also important to not become preoccupied with beating this one deck, Chinchino Mill, or back in LAIC, become preoccupied with beating this one deck, which was Pidgeotto control. And also, like I said, not counting out the past decks like Pidgeotto and Ability Zard as well. And I think that'll just about wrap up with what I wanted to talk about. This was just kind of a stream of consciousness that I was thinking about some behaviors and attitudes that happen before every major event, and maybe if I can talk about this before the event, it can actually shape and help some more logical behavior and attitude for the next time, and maybe make people more self-aware about the ruts, maybe not the ruts they're falling into, but the roads they're going down, of over exaggerating how good the new scary deck is just because it is the new scary deck. And that's something that happens a lot, and it's natural to happen. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little talk I did. In the beginning, about the 4-minute mark, I've been having an issue where my videos are lagging a little around the 4 to 5 minute mark. So I apologize for that. I've been trying to get it fixed. It only happens on some, so it's weird, but thanks for sticking through that. Sorry about that little inconvenience. Like I said at the beginning, check out PotownStore.com and FlipsideGaming.com. Very happy to be working with both of those sites. Follow my team on Twitter, by the way. I don't talk about it a lot, but I'm on Team Gas, and our Twitter is at Team Gas Pokemon, and it's a super great group of guys. We just did a meta discussion for Expanded on this channel, I believe yesterday, when you'll see this video. So thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.